Persona 5 has undoubtedly become an icon, a face that now represents the JRPG genre, a merit that has been earned to being an experience filled with extremely polished mechanics, standout dungeons, a colorful cast of characters, and an overabundance of style on every single corner. No matter if you like it or not, you can't deny that Persona 5 has captivated so many people. Persona 3, on the other hand, is a product of its time, an experience that can be enjoyed by many due to its core mechanics, a single randomly generated dungeon, a flawed combat system, balance issues, and harsh difficulty curves. And while the PSP port does fix a lot of these issues, the difference between these two games is day and night, and yet, I can't help but think that Persona 3 is a much better experience. And you might be wondering, why am I comparing specifically 3 and 5? What about 1, 2, the other 2 and 4? That's because... Sir, we found someone who is aware Persona 1 and 2 exist. What shall I do? Erase his memories. Roger. That's because... What was I talking about again? Wait. I am Mexican?! So of the Persona trilogy, why am I comparing specifically 3 and 5 but not 4? I don't really like this game. This is not an opinion based on an elitist complex where I say, you'll never understand my pain, bro. I beat Persona 3. Or because I have some sort of bias. 5 was my first Persona game, so that excuse is not gonna fly. Regardless of what I'm about to say in this video, there's one thing I have to make clear. I still believe Persona 5 is a fantastic game that I hold in high regards, and I truly believe many games should aim as high as this one did. In terms of gameplay and presentation, of course. Because even after beating the game, time allowed me to see that Persona 5 is by no means perfect, because it hides its flaws with the stylish spectacle it delivers every second, and underneath all that there is a flawed concept with mediocre writing and butcher characters, but to explain that we have to understand the themes it goes for. The foundation of Persona 5 is fixed on revolution. It wants to deliver a message, and that is told during the opening song. The game is telling the player to fight against an unjust and oppressing society that is ruled by corrupt individuals with power. But the message doesn't go too far because in context of the story, the Phantom Thieves do this through a magical application that makes them force people to change their way of thinking. There are times, many different instances where the characters want to fight through their own merits, and all of these attempts are futile because every time the cast wants to defend themselves they fail. Being expelled by Kamoshida, Makoto being drugged and brutalized by Kaneshiro, Haru being sold off, these are all scenarios that could have happened had the Phantom Thieves never had access to the metaverse. The message the game wants to deliver falls short because it shows no real life application to it. What I gather from this is that unless you have a shonen protagonist power with plot convenient magic that helps you to force people to do what you want, there is nothing you can do to change things, and if you ever try to make a change, you better be prepared to get your entire life ruined. And you'll probably say, "Ha, it's just a video game, why are you thinking so hard about it, loser?" I mean, yeah, it is a video game. Its utmost priority is to be fun, and this game does that with no problem, and of course, I must expect things that are impossible to achieve in real life. But Persona 5 is also a game that aims to do something more because it very clearly wants to deliver a message, and it doesn't do a good job at that. Persona 3 handles this in a completely different way. Thematically speaking, it's a game that surrounds itself with death, and it is a topic that is handled with a lot of seriousness and maturity. Almost all the characters in this game have experienced or will experience the loss of a loved one, either to explain their backstories, understand their motives, or help them grow as people. The concept of death is present on many different instances throughout the story. But death is not used in a way to acquire a mentality of, I will not try anything because I will die in the end. It's used to deliver the message of finding a meaning and something to live for. This is exemplified through the characters. The game shows how these characters face the concept of death being inevitable. They learn about it, they know they have no control over it. And with such a lingering fear, they discover what their lives mean at the end of the day. And yet, even with such a dreadful topic hanging onto the main plot, Persona 3 is not a fully depressing game. Even though the inevitability of death is its focus, it also shows the characters having a good time, living a normal life, and fighting for their futures. And that helps the message become more effective. We all know our ultimate end, and that's why we gotta live our lives to their fullest. The message of Persona 3 has a complete opposite effect from 5, because death is the only certain truth every person in the world has. The characters within 3 handle this in so many realistic manners, and that makes the players easily empathize with them, something the characters in Persona 5 couldn't do as good. Which brings me to my next topic of discussion. If your game has a heavy emphasis on story, it's totally acceptable to deliver a message. You can do this through the natural story progression, but you can also squeeze a major extra out of it if you have the characters that use these themes correctly so that the message can effectively reach the player. Persona 5 sort of attempts to do that, but it's just like I mentioned already. You have all these characters trying to stand up for themselves, but they fall in impossible situations where fighting in reality means getting their lives ruined. Persona 5 actually starts very solid in its writing. Kamoshida was an outstanding villain. He was rotten to the core, he ruined so many people, he sexually abused his students, and in the short time that you meet him, he manages to establish so many personal reasons to motivate the player to take him down at all costs. And then the villains don't get any better. With the exception of Shido, who also has build up, the rest of the villains are just a means to an end, and the message of revolution is not well executed because their main reason to take them down is just... Alright boys, to which shitty adult shall we apply the cancel culture today? And it's not just the villains, the main cast also starts off in a very great way. You can easily empathize with them and they have as many reasons as you to take Kamoshida down. And here's where, what I believe, the biggest offender of Persona 5 lies, how it butchers its characters. There's a set of tragic backstories, great motives to join your cause, but the game only wants to take them seriously when it feels like it. The most insulting one in my opinion is Ryuji. I like his backstory and character a lot. He's not the brightest guy around, but he's a good person at heart. And after the conflict with Kamoshida is over, he's reduced to a comedy punching bag. And the worst, the one thing that genuinely pisses me off is this scene. My man, that's a real bro right there!
Man, that was close.
It's your damn fault!
What did I do? I'm feeling a bit hungry.
Why don't we stop by somewhere before going home?
And Ryuji is not the only one. Anta Kameki is also a victim of this butchering. A girl that was considered an outcast due to her foreign blood, who is heavily implied to be sexually abused, and someone who almost lost her best friend in an attempted suicide. She's interesting, but what do they do with her? Fan service. After Kamoshida, she barely contributes anything important to the group, and is just a pretty face to carry around. And this extends to almost all the Phantom Thieves. Haru does literally nothing, Makoto acquires the personality of a plank of wood, don't even get me started on a genuinely awful Morgana subplot with Haru. Goro Akechi. I really hate this guy. At first he makes the player question the morality of their actions, and makes them wonder if their justice is absolute. These are great points that are worth of discussion, but what's the real face of the guy who brings them up? A hypocrite psychopath that goes on a killing spree because he has daddy issues and has no friends. Never, ever seen before in Japanese media. And don't misunderstand, I am not calling these characters awful, aside from Akechi. They are charming and distinguishable in their own ways. They can have their own great moments with their confidence, and of course, seeing them goof around is always a welcome sight. But this is only when the game feels like it. And that's a major issue. The game only wants to be serious when it wants, not when the situation demands it. It sets up all these delicate but serious issues that people can relate to. Family abuse, sexual assault, depression, lack of self-validation, anxiety. But it doesn't take them too far. And then comes the Persona 3 cast. So let me start my argument with a little question. Alright man, this is it for 3 billion points! Now, what's the best way to describe a generic JRPG?
I got it! A bunch of teenagers are orbiting around your dick, kill God with the power of friendship.
Correct! The thing I like the most about the cast of Persona 3 is how refreshing it felt. You could say that compared to the cast of 4 and 5, the SEES members are the less united of them all, and there is some truth in that. Nobody's there because they admire each other or because of the protagonist, with the sole exception being Aigis. They're there for their own personal reasons and because of the situation they find themselves in, and grow closer as they learn to trust one another. And even so, they do not entirely depend on you for literally everything. Throughout the story you get glimpses of them, living their own daily lives so you can understand their inner struggles. And sure, they help one another at times, but what I find so endearing about them is that they, individually, give themselves the final push to go on and grow as a result, which is demonstrated by how they evolve their personas by their own merits. I find characters like that so entertaining because they don't do what they do on command, or because of belief on someone else. They do that because of the faith they have on themselves. But the evolution of their personas is not the peak of their development. When Cs question themselves if they should die peacefully in ignorance or fight for their future, when Aegis has an existential crisis after the protagonist's death, when Yukari suffers a breakdown after losing the battle for the keys, those are just a few examples of how they keep falling, keep committing mistakes, and continue to learn about them. I am not saying all of them were right. I mean, Yukari almost doomed humanity. But flawed characters are so attractive to me because I find them to be more believable, more real, and more human. The villains of Persona 3 are not the most outstanding ones I've ever seen in a game, although Takaya is a highlight, but I think they fulfill their purpose because they have a strong presence during important sections of the story. They work as polar opposites of what the characters fight for. The villains are cynical and have nihilistic views of the world. I found the final boss of the game, Nyx, to be a fantastic conclusion to everything because... First, her fight has 14 goddamn faces, I died in the last one! Ah! But I really love the way in which she shifts arcanas while explaining their purpose. Nyx has a great build-up leading to her arrival, which culminated in a symbolic fight that embodies the themes the game goes for. Yaldabaoth, the final boss of Persona 5, didn't hit those spots for me. I like how he uses the deadly sins as a means of attack during his battle, which connects to how all the Pala Sounders represent one of the sins. But I didn't find Yaldabaoth and the Holy Grail to be as symbolic as Nyx. When I see Nyx, I see the Harbinger of the Fall, an entity who is not inherently evil, but follows her own nature based on the subconscious desires of humanity. When I see Yaldabaoth, I just see the final boss. This goes back to my previously stated problem of the game not taking its themes too far. Perhaps there is more behind him, perhaps I just entirely missed his point, but as things stand now, he's just an entity I have to defeat because the game demands it. Although his fight is really fun. This is the last and the most subjective topic on this video, but I just simply prefer the Persona 3 soundtrack. Both games have amazing songs that you can bang at any given moment. They all perfectly emphasize the mood they want to go for, and they are all hyper when it comes to battle. I just wanna say, Mass Destruction is one of my favorite songs, period. 5 is more jazzy, while 3 is more atmospheric. It's that emphasis on atmosphere that gives 3 the edge on the soundtrack, because of the feelings it induces on me. It makes me get more involved in the events that transpire. The final month of the game, when the world is silently coming to an end. The dreadful moments, the absolute final moments when Aegis thanks you for giving her a reason to live. You feel them. You feel them in different ways. And the game's amazing soundtrack is a major contributor to that. And when a game manages to deliver feelings that unique, it's amazing, you know that? My objective with this video was not to make Persona 5 seem like a bad game. I reiterate, I still believe it is fantastic, but it is important to point out that it has some flaws that are severely underlooked because the aesthetics blind you from seeing that they do in fact exist. But I also wanted to point out why a game with inherent problems like Persona 3 can leave a huge impact if it knows how to manage its themes. Just one final thing, the ending of Persona 5 is beautiful and heartwarming. Just as I hope it will be, a natural conclusion after all I went through, but that's it. I beat the game and felt happy. I remembered all the good moments I spent with it, but on the long run I noticed not a lot stuck with me. And on the other side of things, I knew about the ending of Persona 3 years before I even played the game. Throughout my entire journey, I knew what was waiting for me, but despite that, and the gameplay angering me on uncountable occasions, I was engaged the entire way because of all the reasons I already stated. I wanted to see it all the way through, and when I reached that ending, it hit. It hit really hard. That's why I believe Persona 3 is better, not because of gameplay or style, but because it left a huge mark on me.
隠した瞳を願うこと辛くても立ち向かう勇気君にもらっただから